Hi everyone. My name's Professor Onita Basu. I'm the instructor for filtration and membranes. I'm going to be posting, small short videos under our blended model for the course to help with the course content. So we will be having our online meetings, but some of the content will be offline to help you guys, manage our way through this particular system. All right. So the first module that I'm going to do my sort of mini little lecture on is the article review, summary, critique that we will be doing in the course. Every week you will be assigned at least one article that you need to review and be prepared to discuss in class. In addition, you will be summarizing with a little bit of a critique of that article. So we're just going to talk about my expectations for what you need to do this successfully. So I have a document and I will be posting it online with the course content as well. And so, why are we reading journal articles? In undergrad, we focus mostly on textbooks, sometimes just our lecture notes. And then in fourth year or as we move into grad school, we start looking at journal articles. Journal articles allow us to really drill down on a specific topic. So we're looking at filtration and membranes. And, for instance, let's take filtration. There's slow sand filtration, conventional filtration, biofiltration, sandbank filtration, infiltration, and those are just the kinds of filtration. And then there's like all the parameters associated with that. Are we looking at turbidity? Are we looking at backwashing? Are we looking at biological activity? Are we just so many things. So the journal articles start to give us that specific information to allow us to get to another degree of mastery of different subject matter. So when we're looking at the article, when we're reading the article, I really want you guys to take the time to review it in an active way. So maybe you're a first-year master's student or a second-year master's student, first-year PhD student, or a long-term PhD student. The process is still the same, and that is it's going to take you a long time to read the article. You'll notice that what I have in my little write-up here is that you're going to have to read the article more than one time. You may read it 3 or 4 times to really understand the message of that article. And I'll flip it on its head and say, if you only read the article once, then you're not going to understand the article very well. This is important because we're going to be discussing it in the class that's online, and also you have to provide a summary that will be marked at some point. Okay. So, what are some of the things that you need to think about? Well, the first thing you need to think about are the terms in the article. If you're not familiar with, filtration and membranes, you may not know the term concentrate and permeate, backwash, or, even more challenging, the acronyms TOC, CEB, ATP. Like, those are all really common terms for me because I'm used to filtration and membranes. So when you're first starting, take the time to highlight words you don't know, look them up so that you get to understand the content of the course and of the material that you're reading. And while you're reading the article, I've come up with a kind of list of questions that you can ask yourself. They are not in order of how you read the article, and that's on purpose. It's because I want you to be thinking about a lot of things at one time. And when you're writing your summary, I don't want you to think you can just try and answer all of these questions in order. That's not really the best way to learn in this particular case. So you have to try and find them in the article like a game. Does the abstract seem interesting? That's that might seem like a weird one. Like, who cares if the abstract is interesting or not? But one day you might have to write. So is the abstract interesting? If not, you remember that so that when you're writing your abstract, you do make it interesting. One of the key things in an article is the objectives of the research. If you don't know what the objectives are, it's not a very good article. So that would be something to critique. That part should always be very clear. What is the message the author is trying to convey? Is there sufficient and pertinent articles referenced in the document itself? This is important because you don't want to have someone claim they've discovered something for the first time when they haven't, and you know that there's another article on it. So you know, or can they use other articles to back up their research? Do they need to use other articles to back up their research? You know, is the analysis of the results sufficient? Like, did you learn enough? Do you have extra questions? Has sufficient statistical consideration been included? Some data is more easy to assess with a statistical analysis, and some is more challenging, but just something to keep in mind in terms of reproducibility. You know, how are the methods and materials? Should some of the data be expanded or removed? You know, why? Did you find any errors in the article? I'm not particularly talking about formatting errors. I'm talking about content errors. Occasionally you will see that, and it should really throw off your confidence in that article in its entirety if that is what you see. Very importantly, do the conclusions match the objectives? If you have objectives and your conclusions don't match, then I don't know what you were writing about. So that is something that we should look at when we're reading an article in total. And, you know, finally, what did you learn? You know, hopefully there's one piece, if not more, of information that has helped your understanding in the field of filtration and membranes by reading the article and talking about it and writing about it. So, a couple of important points for the course. When you submit the article to me, you need to make sure you reference, just in the title, the article itself. So I am going to be using APA formatting with this course, and I've given you an example of what that looks like. So essentially, author, publication year, title of the article, the journal, the volume and the issue number, and then the page number. I also have some formatting criteria for when you submit your article summary, I should say for your article summary. Do not deviate from this. 12-point font, Arial, 1.5 spacing, margins 1 inch all around. Anything longer than 2 pages won't be read and won't be counted as actually being an effective submission. So that's really important to keep track of. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to pull up an article and we're going to look at it, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of points that I'm talking about. All right, so I picked one of my previous articles to do a quick little overview of some of the things to look for when you're reading an article. I've also included, you can see in the bottom left-hand side here, kind of the formatting style that you use when you're actually referencing the article itself as well. Now this article is called The Influence of Backwash Regime on Biofilter Performance in Drinking Water Treatment. It was co-authored with myself and one of my former master's students who is now a process engineer in water with Veolia. And so the first thing that's kind of interesting is the abstract. Most abstracts you see won't look like this. They don't have the background, the results, and the conclusion kind of pulled out of them into like subsections, although that is kind of the way you write an abstract itself. Now, I'm biased, of course, so I'm going to say, of course, that abstract is super interesting. So that's not one of the points that I'll cover off for you. In the introduction of an article should tell you, you know, where the background of why you're doing the article comes from, like what is interesting about the article itself, whereas the abstract is focused kind of on the results that was obtained. Now, every introduction, the very last paragraph should include the objectives of the article itself. So if we look at this one, I'll just pull it up a little bit closer. We can see in this last paragraph here, I explicitly state, you know, the main objective of this study is to investigate the impact of various backwash regimes, including ETSW, on DOC removal in a biofilter. So this is a great point for me to also highlight parts where you may be confused. What is ETSW and what is DOC and what is a biofilter even? So again, if you're new to the subject area, these might be words that you're highlighting to gain a better understanding of, the content itself. And then I talk about the overall aim of the research, okay? And of course, every article will have a methods and materials section. The methods and materials section, the part that I find most useful is the experimental design of the experiment itself to get the results. Because if you don't have a very good experimental design, then you're going to have a hard time getting results. In terms of the methods, like the analytical analysis, I generally try and believe that the methods that they're using are correct. If I'm using those techniques in my lab and I'm trying to find information, I might be a little bit more critical on it. But for the purpose of reviewing an article itself, I like to focus in on the experimental plan. So you can see here, I've got a list of backwash experiments. In fact, this one has, not here, a little bit farther down. Let me shrink this for a second. Again, we can see here that there's a schematic included. I find schematics are helpful to help you know what's going on. So you can see here that there's 3 columns that were run, biofilter columns, and that's where the experiments kind of took place. Okay, so what are you looking at when you're reading the article though? So I talked about, like the results and the discussion. So you've got the objectives. The objective said we're looking at backwashing techniques and how that impacts various parameters. So when we look at the results, that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Well, here we've got a backwash condition and we've got a result, and another backwash condition with results. And so the thing you might be looking at, for instance, real quickly, is, there's no change here, although there's a lot of error. There's a lot of variation in the results. So when you look at the conclusions or you look at the comments by the authors, you might want to know, is this really a different value, or was this an error in the experiment when none of these changed? Is it important that none of those changed? Did we want to see a change or don't we want to see a change? It doesn't really matter in this context. I'm just saying that when you look at a figure, these are the kind of questions you should be asking yourselves. Like, what were they expecting to get? Were those in the objectives, and do those all kind of meet together? Okay, same thing here. This is the experimental plan for this particular experiment. So they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different backwash experiments that the authors are doing. In this case, I was the author, or the co-author, but those are the experiments. So you can look at that and see if they're different enough and if all of this makes sense for the content of the article. There's more results here. So here's one result that you could definitely critique if you were to read this. We've got DOC removal on the y-axis and DO removal on the x-axis. If we look at our R squared, it's only 0.3639. It's pretty low. In the article, though, we say that this is a correlation. You could probably argue that that's not a very good correlation, or it is a good correlation. I'll leave that to you, but definitely that's the kind of thing that might be something that you could critique. There's some more results here. Again, you look at the results, you see what they're trying to say in the content. So I look at the figure and you make your own interpretation of the figure. You look at what the authors wrote. You don't have to inherently believe what the authors wrote about the figure. That's up for you to try and assess. Most of the time you could say that it's probably pretty good, but it's something for you to assess. Okay, this is supposed to be short. So summary and conclusions. You can see that in the summaries and conclusions, I'm talking about, collapse pulsing to the backwash strategy has an impact. We talk about how bed expansion has impact. These are all different backwashing techniques. So, the main objective was to look at backwashing, and that is matched within the conclusions of the article. So that would at least tell you that the authors were trying very hard to have a very clear, succinct article. sometimes you'll read the objectives and the conclusions and they don't match at all, which probably means something went weird in the experiments, but the authors needed to go back and kind of clarify that so that you had a better idea of what they were trying to do within that article. And then, always quickly look at the references to see what you think about them. You don't necessarily have to comment, but it's always kind of good to know about it a little bit. And that's just, again, I didn't want to be exhaustive. This is just supposed to be a short short-ish video to help you get started in the course with your article review, summary, critiques. And that's about it. Okay. I will see you guys in class at some point. And every time I say in class, I mean online. The course is online, but I don't think I need to say like in class online all the time because it's just going to be online. Okay. See you soon.